Hi, I'm Dr. George Yancey. Let's share some paradigms. And the paradigm I'll share today concerns is viewpoint diversity, a MAGA plot. Now, I say this because of an article that came out not too long ago, arguing that viewpoint diversity in academia is a MAGA plot. In other words, having different views in academics, where we're trying to do science, that somehow is tied to MAGA trying to take over academia. Now, does that sound a little silly to you? Because it kind of sounds silly to me, to be honest. It really does. It's hard for me to take that argument seriously. Viewpoint diversity by itself may not be what our goal is, but it helps us to accomplish the goal of looking at different ideas and evaluating them, and then coming to the conclusion of which idea is better. That's what science is supposed to be about. Too often it is not. And when it is not, there's all sorts of problems that come along with that. Problems of we can't legitimate ourselves as scientists, problems of getting the wrong ideas. When people make claims like this, they almost always ignore the research out there on progressive bias in the sciences. Now, I've done some of this research. I've talked about it in another video, the work I did in a book about 10 or 15 years ago called Compromise in Scholarship, where I document on the willingness of academics to weed out conservatives when they're hiring them. But I'm not the only one. There's another famous study by Ember and Lammers that note among social psychologists a willingness to discriminate against conservatives on a variety of different issues, such as accepting an article, hiring, whether they invite men for a symposium, all sorts of ways. And ironically, the people who are most progressive, who are willing to discriminate, are the ones who claim there's no bias. The bias is there. And when people claim that viewpoint diversity is just something that conservatives are dreaming up to get at the sciences, they've missed the mark. Because the evidence is there's a bias there, and there's even some evidence showing that this bias hampers our ability to find the truth or to evaluate data, to do the things that scientists are supposed to do. Now, before I move on, let me just say if you enjoy this sort of conversation, if you enjoy this topic or the way I approach it, and the way I approach the rest of this video, consider giving me a like. Consider subscribing. If you have problems, if you have something you want to argue, go ahead, comment as well. Consider telling other people about this channel. I hope you do, because I would like to get this message out. This is a channel where I'm a Christian and I try to approach things from neither the left or the right, but create a space for those of us who are not comfortable with either of those two areas. Anyway, let me go on. So, part of the concern is the Trump administration, all right? And let me just say that I am concerned about the Trump administration. This sort of compact for academic excellence, I'm not comfortable with it. I'm not comfortable with the Trump administration taking away grant money because they don't like the views of people out there. I'm not comfortable with the Trump administration trying to limit who can come to college from around the world. I'm not comfortable with their attempt to micromanage some of the departments they don't like. I acknowledge there's a problem. And that's the problem with articles such as viewpoint diversity is a MAGA plot. It doesn't acknowledge there is a problem. But here's the thing. If we in academia don't take care of the problem, it will be taken care of for us. And we may not like the ways it is taken care of. There are ways in which we can address these issues. And we must be serious about addressing these issues. We must deal with these problems. There are real solutions. For example, we should be very intentional about viewpoint diversity in academia. That does not mean that we hire someone just because they think differently. But we have to recognize in academia, there is an atmosphere of a progressive bias. So if we don't intentionally ask ourselves questions along the way in hiring, when it comes to setting up funding, when it comes to whether accepting an article. Is this about progressive bias or not? Then we'll fall into those sort of traps. We should seek out programs. We should seek out departments that have actually hired non-progressives, and perhaps use those departments as examples of what we can do better. Perhaps non-progressives may seek to work at some of those departments. Nothing wrong with a department that does not fit with everyone else, that actually has different ideas. That's viewpoint diversity. We can be intentional in solving these problems. A head-in-the-sand approach invites the sort of mechanisms we see from the Trump administration. That is not to excuse the attacks on, say, DEI, which I have criticized. And yes, criticize it, yes. But to try to take away money from programs because they promote it or argue for it, we need to defend progressives, if you will, from the attacks of the Trump administration. And indeed, I feel an obligation to do so because I've been vocal about the lack of tolerance for different ideas when it was non-progressives who were suffering. My stance of viewpoint diversity is not so that my view reigns supreme, although I want to argue for my view. I want to argue for the things that I find and my perspective. But that's not why I advocate for viewpoint diversity. I'm advocating for viewpoint diversity because it is the right way to go about it. It is what we should be doing in academia. We should take in these ideas, evaluate them, throw out the bad ones, but always be in a state of evaluating and seeing what we could be doing wrong. Once again, if we don't do this, we're inviting the Trump administration or some future administration to use draconian steps to force us to do it. We will not like those solutions. My general idea, my general perspective is that we can improve the sciences and gain legitimacy among the popular public if we show that we're serious about viewpoint diversity. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Once again, if you know someone who might like it, please tell them. Come back again. We can shatter some more paradigms.